Hey, hey. Hello and welcome to the Spoilers with Diacre. I am Diacre, aka Daryl Ducharme, and I'm here at your safe space for fans to be excited. So, what we've got here now is our show this week. Got some exciting news. Going to start something new with this podcast, and it's something old, something new, actually, if you know it. So please keep up with us and stick around for the length of this podcast so we can discuss all the exciting news and more. But before we get into that, I do want to say thank you to all of my listeners and especially my Patreon patrons. So that would be Debbie, Drew, Danielle, and Shane. Thank you very much to all of you for your continued support financially, and feel free to share the word of it. You can go to patreon.com/spoilerdiacre. I have it on good authority that if you just go to patreon.com/spoilerd, I'm what comes up, but you can figure it out from here. Just look up in the top right corner. If you're on Twitch TV, you can see it's Spoiler, Diacre, and you will get to me. Also, with same thing with all the other social media. Okay, before we get started with the shows, let me let you know what I'm going to be talking about today. So yes, I am going to talk about Flash Season 5. Finally, kind of backlog of shows like a lot of things have been for a while now. Lots going on, but finally got finished with Flash Season 5, so I'm going to discuss Flash Season 5, how it ended, and what I think about that. Going to discuss Brightburn. It was a movie that came out this week, sort of a superhero horror is how it was described to me, but we will get into that. And finally, Static. I already discussed this in I believe it was either my last episode or my episode before that. And still, you can go to YouTube, just look up Static Shock movie from David Kirkman Productions. But the thing I wanted to talk about is something old, something new. I used to have another podcast called The Seattle After Party, which was dedicated to the artists, entertainers, and creative people who made the Seattle area great. But I stopped doing that for various reasons. And one of the things I really miss from doing that is all the interviews I got to do with creative people who are out there making stuff. Because I really, really appreciate what it takes to make something, what it takes to put something out into the world. So being a fan of Static, being a fan of Milestone Comics, and being excited for this to come out, and seeing somebody do what it takes, and then learning that he did this movie for only $3,000, which is crazy to me because there's just so much going on in that 45 minutes. So I wanted to talk to this person. They are just, they have made something, put something out in the world, and they're going to continue to put stuff out into the world with this Dakota City Chronicles. But even beyond that, they're just trying. They're not trying. They are doing. They are making these movies and some other stories. So I'm actually going to be doing an interview with David Kirkman, and I'm actually doing that tomorrow as of this recording. So by the time you may be listening to it, I may have already done the interview. But next week's episode will include that interview with David Kirkman. So hey, let me know. What are you interested in finding out? Maybe I can make sure to highlight those. I've never edited one of these episodes and edited one of these interviews together before. So maybe I'll do it in a different fashion based off your input. So just let me know through social media. Just go to Spoiler Diacre on Twitter or Instagram, or you can go to thespoilerswd.com and fill out the contact form, or just go to Facebook and look up the Spoilers with Diacre, and there you go. Let me know what you are into, what kind of questions you hope I asked, or if you're listening to this before the morning, let me know, because I'm still to ask those questions as of this recording now. By the way, happy Memorial Day out there, folks. I hope you are celebrating it in the right way for you. Okay. Other than that, I did say, so I'm talking with David Kirkman, and that'll be on next week's episode. Very, very excited about that. I got totally jazzed when I had because I've been thinking about it for a while. I would like to talk to this guy, but I don't really do interviews on this show. Well, I'm going to start doing interviews, and I just said, let's make him the first one. Let's kick myself in the pants and let's do this. So very excited to have David Kirkman giving me some of his time so that we can talk about what he's up to, whatever comes up. Because if anybody knows me, anybody who used to listen to the Seattle After Party knows, I follow the improv pattern and just kind of see where it goes. I have some research I do, some basic stuff to get me started, but that's just a starting point. So we'll see where we go from there. All right, Brightburn. Let's get on to this. I've said before in a lot of episodes that I am not a fan of horror movies. So the fact that I went to see one is something. Well, part of it is because somebody invited me, and you invite me to a movie, and unless I have a really big reason not to go, then chances are I'm going to go see it. I love movies. They're one of my favorite forms of entertainment. So I went to see Brightburn, and like I said, it was kind of described as superhero horror, and there's some superheroic elements in it, in that it kind of takes the idea of what if something similar to what happened to Superman happened, but with a species that, instead of trying to save the knowledge of their species and save one child or multiple children, depending on which parts of the super stories you're looking at. We'll talk about Supergirl later. But instead of doing that, you have a species that sends their offspring to a planet they're this super strong, super deadly offspring to a planet in order to have somebody else raise them until they're ready to assert their dominance over the species of the planet. And that's basically the idea of Brightburn, with a wrapper of horror. Now, right off the bat, I know this movie is not written for me, in that I'm not a horror fan. So everything I say, please take it with a grain of salt. 100% a bunch of people work together to make this movie, and I really don't have a strong opinion about this movie, because for me, I felt like the movie was very, very plain. I don't think it tried very hard to be anything, really. I think there were some moments, but it kind of felt, with this really cool premise of what if, instead of the Superman tale of this, let's take the tale of an alien species sending their offspring to Earth, but what if it was for this other reason that is based off of, at least in this story, they discuss it, a type of wasp that has other wasps raise their children. It's kind of a line early on in the movie that's just like, we're going to ham-handedly tell you what's happening without, have it be. There's no mystery to this movie. So they don't really have anything where it feels like much of a mystery. What I felt was, and this might be me, there were an occasional jump scare at certain points, but that's not the movie it was. It wasn't a jump scare movie, so it wasn't like, oh, here's a jump scare. Is this going to be one? No, it's like they had some early on, but then not later on, and everything seemed a little middle of the road, as it were. I think, looking at it from what I think horror is, and once again, sorry to horror fans, somebody's going to love this movie. I'm sure of it, because they put some production values into it. It's got a cool concept, but it was very predictable, super, super duper predictable. Like I could see everything coming from like the beginning of the movie as it happened. They would drop something that you're just like, oh, they're not giving us this as just something that's world building. They're giving us this as something that is obviously alluding to something they're going to use later in the movie. It was just plain and straight. It's like, okay, they're saying this very specifically. It, it was this kind of sense of, oh, you're just telling this story. So in that sense, I kind of felt like I didn't care about any of the characters in some ways. So, which, there should be a mix of characters, I think. I don't know. In horror movies, there's the characters you want to see get their comeuppance, and you're like glad they die. But then there's the ones you're rooting for, but you're like, no. And you didn't really see that much. I mean, there were some that you could kind of get behind. But yeah, it's too bad because, I mean, like I said, a good premise, I think, had they chosen a way to go with it or not. Sometimes horror movies tend to go with the more grotesque, and they had some shots that were interesting. One that they did exceedingly well was actually probably the first really clear use of his vindictive superpower use. And it was the beginning of this attack on one woman, breaks a light above her head as she's looking up. Pieces of glass get stuck in her, cut up her face, and one gets stuck in her eye. And they do a really cool effect where they've got like a contact lens or something on their eye, must have, because she's trying to get it out and she moves her eye and the piece moves too. That was actually pretty cool. I got to say I was like, that added a moment. And if they had kind of kept to some of that kind of stuff, where it was like really kind of like that, ooh, but wow, like you really felt it in that moment. Then they went to some levels of some other stuff. I think there was some stuff, once again, like some of the other stuff that might have been cool. There was another scene where he causes a car accident, which causes a guy to slam in, as usual. If you're in a horror movie, wear your seatbelt, because you're going to get into a car wreck and it's going to cause mad. I don't know. I say that as usual, as if I've ever given that advice ever before, and I haven't. But a very grotesque thing with where the way he hits the steering wheel with his jaw, and it's a grotesqueness. And at first, they do it really quickly, and you just see a little bit of it, and you're like, given what they showed before, I thought they would be doing a little more of this. And they did try and do something with it, but I think they could have done more, and if they had done more, it would have been like, okay, yeah, I see what they're doing with this, because there's sometimes people who really, I don't really dig it, but from an artistic approach, I'm like, okay, I can see what they're trying to do here. But that was it. Those were the two. And everything else that happened was kind of light by that. Like, it didn't seem to just keep ramping up the quality story. It really seemed like it was kind of slow burn, pun intended, because all puns should be intended, at the very beginning to get started, to really get the motor running. And then when it did, it felt like it was a race to the end of the third act. And that just seemed to me a bit of a letdown. There were some bits that like I said, I could see everything coming. It was like, okay, that's going to do this. This is going to do that. And it was a little bit too predictable. Maybe I've seen too many movies. I am a movie nut. And like I said, if you're a horror fan, maybe this was brand new ways to get to these places, and they were pulling from other genres in ways that newer movie fans might not be used to. Like I said, watch the movie if you want to. I'm just not going to give it a big push, because it was just kind of so mediocre in ways. Like, it was a movie. It was projected onto the screen. It was well produced. They had some good shots, but even the shots seemed to be part of the things that were making it very clear what they were about to do. You know, sometimes they have shots and like, okay, I see where this is going. So I can't really recommend Brightburn too hard, but good on them for taking a stab. Yes, another pun. Taking a stab at a difficult genre to get right. I mean, and I'm not their audience, so maybe they've totally gotten it right. And I will say that I will totally take that. I was glad I went to see a movie. Always glad to see a movie. So there's that. All right, and finally, let's get into Flash season 5 and how it ended. Now they're finally ending this story arc that really started last season. I remember I had a friend who was asking me about Nora's character before we knew who she was. I mean, there was a lot of thinking on the internet that she was somebody from the future, and they were right about that. There were some other theories, but they didn't pan out. But Nora, yeah, I kind of had the sense that she knew them and she was from the future, and it turns out she was Barry and Iris's daughter. And so this season was that whole arc coming to an end. And it was, I thought, really well done, because the whole season really had 3 villains. I mean, since you've also got the Reverse Flash. So, and the 2 villains were the 2 different versions of Cicada, which I loved it. I loved the way that they took one level of Cicada and they made this big bad who was able to remove their meta powers and was sort of in its own way, sort of a horror-esque sort of this type of villain, like a classic horror-esque villain where they just kept coming and you just couldn't stop them, and things were happening, and there was sort of some there were even some dreams of deaths that you couldn't stop and things like that. And I thought that was really cool. But then they, mid-season, got rid of him and replaced him with his daughter from the future. And she was even more badass in that she comes on the scene and has some meta powers of her own, but she's still viciously against all the metas. And she's going to that, and she gets the Cicada dagger and then starts going to town. And I just thought, wow, that was really well done, because they took somebody who was pretty badass all by themselves and stepped it up a notch, because it was a believable character. It was you could kind of see, okay, whenever you mess with time and stuff, you can kind of fill in the gaps in lots of odd ways. You can try and tell the story of, okay, we're going to be giving this whole tale of what might have happened without her father or with her father. I guess I didn't quite get that, but anyways, she had lost her parents to some metas, so that made sense that she already had kind of a hatred, but just kept going. And in the end, they did a really great job of getting it to where they still had access to the younger version. And they make you think like it's going to be all wrapped up in this nice little bow. Because it turns out, even though they have a way to destroy Cicada's dagger, which will stop the whole thing, this has all been a big plan by the Reverse Flash, because Cicada's dagger, with its power to remove meta powers, was attached to him in a way that was removing his powers. So that was why he was trapped. Because the whole season you're kind of wondering, how do they have him trapped? They're not really discussing it. They don't even have like a throwaway line of how they have him trapped. And so it comes to the end where Ralph, they do a really genuinely good job of not dropping the hints about what's happening until like big enough hints that you can start to see until like right before you are going to kind of it's fun to figure it out. You're like, oh, they're going there. And then like 10 minutes later, they're there. And you're like, you didn't see it coming a mile away because they've had the whole season and then they lay it out. And then it's not like they left things out for you, but it was really, really a cool way because you're wondering what is Reverse Flash's motivation during this. Why is he helping Nora? And just to know that it's his plan to get out of his death sentence. And so that was just, I thought that was really cool. Also, because of the lightning bolt type shape of Cicada's knife, which this was such a beautiful design choice that he had it strapped under this thing that you didn't see all season. And when they took it off, you saw it. And once stuff started happening and it disappears, it's kind of burnt in to his yellow jumpsuit he has to be sort of his already logo of yellow on white lightning. It was just, a really nice little touch that I loved that they designed from the beginning of the season. Really, really cool. And as you saw it, and then really, and maybe it's just the dad in me, the touching way where by changing the timelines that they did in order to save Nora in the first place and thus destroy the dagger, this freed the Reverse Flash, but it also changed the timeline so Nora didn't exist anymore in their timeline way. Like some part of it made it so that she didn't exist. Not quite sure what that is, but there you go. And so very, very touching, really great end to it. I think the only thing because there was a lot of cleanup at the end of this. One thing, before we get into my nitpicking, one thing I also liked is, of course, as the Reverse Flash says, I'll see you in our next crisis, which is obviously a reference to Crisis on Infinite Earths that they're doing at the end of next season or mid next season, which is going to squish all of the Earths back together so that they can have all of them in one place. So hopefully that means Supergirl, Black Lightning, are now part of their universe rather than just on other Earths. So they've never touched on Black Lightning in their show, but he should be part of their universe, just in a different city in some way. It would be really cool to see them, or at least the girls from that, be part of the crossover events as well. So here's hoping, fingers crossed, that is what happens there. My nitpicks were the sort of bow wrapping that happened at the end of this season. I mean, it was a great season, so there's some things they wanted to clean up. Every season they get rid of whatever version of Wells they have in some way, and this time he goes off. He had some romantic romance with a person he met in this world, and he goes off to the other Earth to be with her, and that was fine. I think that was fine. They're always getting every season they get rid of whatever version of Wells they have, because they always want to just play with Tom Cavanaugh's other versions of Wells. So I think that's fine. But then the way they kind of, and maybe I'm reading this wrong, but like Cisco, I heard that he's leaving the show, and all they did was take away his vibe powers, which to me doesn't say leaving the show. It just says he's not going to be vibe anymore. But perhaps that's for wrapping up and cleaning up the beginning of next season, where maybe he doesn't feel like enough anymore or something, or he's too close to it. But I really, because he's been such just one of the hearts of the show. It's a multi-hearted system, the Flash is. I would have liked to have seen a little bit better finish for him, a little cleaner, a little more like, here you go, buddy, sort of thing. But we'll see what they do. I mean, season 6 will happen, and we'll see what comes of that. So that's really my only nitpick with the way they ended it. It's just a wonderful show there on the CW, aka the Pretty People Network, with all their shows that are made for people who are not my age, but I still enjoy them quite a bit. Especially The Flash and Supergirl and all the superhero shows such as those. Those are obviously my tops, but my son and I have decided we have got the summer to catch up on Black Lightning and Legends. And I don't really care for Arrow, but yeah, maybe sometime I can get him back on the show to talk about Arrow before it ends next season. So there you go. That has been my review of this week. Very excited to be talking to David Kirkman this week. Let me know if you saw Brightburn, if you're more of a horror fan or whatever you thought. Please, I would love to share a different opinion on this show. So let me know through all of the social media, Twitter or Instagram or any of the others. Look for @SpoilerDiacre of some sort, and that is probably me. I can't imagine anybody else is doing the franglais of those two words, but could happen, I guess. Also, same with The Flash. Let me know about that. And if you've seen the Static Shock movie, I'd love to hear what your thoughts on that are. But if you haven't seen it, go see it, and then let me know what your thoughts are so that I can pass that along to David Kirkman and let him know as well. But until then, thanks for listening. Hasta luego.